Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is Heidi from My Reading Life, and I'm here tonight to film a video talking about my progress so far in the 2018 Read Harder Challenge. The Read Harder Challenge is a year-long reading challenge that is put together by the good folks over at the website Book Riot, and in which they have 24 prompts that encourage you to basically read widely, read outside your comfort zone, maybe encourage you to pick up things that you wouldn't normally pick up. And I've been participating in the Read Harder Challenge for I think the last 3 years. And since we're in June and we're halfway through the year, I thought that this would be a great time to sort of check in and talk about some of the books I've read to meet the prompts in the Read Harder Challenge. I'm going to talk about 12 of the prompts that I've completed so far this year. I've actually completed about 15 of the 24 prompts, I believe, but I'm just going to talk about 12 this time, and then I'll do another video more towards the end of the year where I talk about the rest of the books that I've read for this challenge. So let's just get started. I have my list written here in my journal, and so I'll be referring to that. And let's just get to it. Oh, I did want to mention too, before I get too far along, is I will link the challenge prompts down below so that you can, if you're interested, you can go check those out. So for prompt number 6, we were to read a book about nature. And for that, I read the nonfiction Pandemic by Sonia Shah. This nonfiction book, it talks about how contagions basically travel from place to place and spread around the globe. Specifically, this book looks a lot at cholera, but it also looks at other broad diseases like Ebola. It talks about AIDS and some other things like that. It talks about how something like cholera, which we would expect in today's day and age to be something that basically is a disease of the past, really isn't. There are current cholera outbreaks happening as we speak in places like Haiti, places where natural disasters have occurred, and we're never too far off from the next pandemic. I will say that this book is, it can be a bit frightening at times. If widespread contagion is something that you find frightening, this book might trigger that for you, but it was very well written and I very much enjoyed it. Then for prompt number 7, we were to read a book that is a Western, and for that I read Larry McMurtry's classic Lonesome Dove. This is a chunker of a book, but I loved it. Once I got into it, I just flew through it. I definitely wanted to know what happens next. In this book, we're following 2 semi-retired Texas Rangers who decide to leave their ranch in the borderlands of Texas and drive a herd of cattle up north to Montana, to where they think is basically the last frontier in the United States. And they assemble a cast of characters to help them move these cattle up north, and adventures ensue. It's a great, great book. I just found it beautiful and touching and heartrending, and I loved it. So definitely would recommend that one. For prompt number 8, we were to read a comic written or illustrated by a person of color, and for that I read March by John Lewis, Congressman John Lewis, who is a hero of the Civil Rights Movement. He was one of the leaders, along with Martin Luther King and others, who were encouraging peaceful protest in order to gain civil rights for people of color in this country in the 60s, and he's just an American hero. And this graphic novel tells about his life from childhood right up on through, and it's framed in such a way that he's telling the story from today and sort of reminiscing back to the things that he experienced when he was in the, participating in the 60s and throughout that time period. So very, very good graphic novel. Really gives a good picture of what those times were like. I'm gonna grab my iPad here because most of the rest of these books I don't have physical copies of anymore. But for prompt number 10, we were to read a romance by a person of color, And for that, I read An Extraordinary Union by Alyssa Cole. This, Alyssa Cole is a person of color herself, and this book features a female protagonist, as you can see on the cover, who is a person of color. The main female character in this book, who I don't remember her name, is a spy, and she inserts herself into a home in the southern part of the United States during the Civil War in order to spy for the Union. Meets a guy who is also a spy but is a white man, and they fall in love, and it's all about their struggles, not only to do their jobs as spies, but also to try to find a way to be together. So, excellent book. I really loved it. I wanted to go on and read the next book in this series. The next prompt that I completed was prompt number 12, a celebrity memoir. And for that, I read You Don't Have to Say You Love Me by Sherman Alexie. Now, this book I listened to on audio. I enjoyed it in that format. It's a very powerful memoir. Sherman Alexie is a Native American. He did not have an easy time of it growing up. His parents were not totally stable. There was a lot of drug and alcohol issues. And now Sherman Alexie is, of course, a famous author. However, I will say that I have some caveats, some hesitation in recommending this memoir because of the information that has come out in the months since I completed this book about Sherman Alexie's sexual what's the word I want? He has not been a very good person towards women, shall we say. You can Google it and read all about it, and so, you know, if that's something that you know, I certainly probably would not purchase any of his books at this point, but I did really enjoy this memoir, and it is very well written, so, you know, take that however you want to. The next prompt I completed was prompt number 13, an Oprah Book Club selection, and for that I chose The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. This book is so incredibly amazing. I love this story of a young girl who is African American in the South, and she just wants to have blonde hair and blue eyes. And it's such a heartbreaking story. There, again, I will warn you, there is abuse, child abuse, and domestic abuse in this novel, so be prepared for that. But Toni Morrison's writing is just amazing, and I'm so glad that I finally picked this one up and read it. The next prompt I completed was prompt number 14, a book of social science, and for that one I read Too Fat, Too Slutty, Too Loud, The Rise and Reign of the Unruly Woman by Helen Petersen. And this is a collection of essays in which the author basically takes a female pop culture person and explains why they don't quite fit the mold of what a good woman is supposed to act like or be like. So this book, there's a chapter on Madonna, and there's a chapter on Nicki Minaj, and there's a chapter on, I can't even remember all the different ones. There's quite a few different essays, each about a different person, and it sort of takes on, you know, like Madonna doesn't act her age. She acts too young for her age. She doesn't admit how old she is. She doesn't, like, fold herself up in a corner and pretend that she, you know, doesn't have any attraction to the opposite sex anymore, like old women are supposed to do. And each one of these essays was really good. I, again, listened to this on audio, and I think it's very good in that format. It was very enjoyable to listen to. So definitely, if you're interested in reading about feminism, gender issues, our culture of celebrity, any of that kind of thing, that was a really good collection of essays to read. Then prompt number 15 is to read a book in one sitting, and for that I read Blue is the Warmest Color by Julie Maroh. This is a graphic novel, and it's basically the love story of two young lesbian women in France, I believe, and it was really, really beautiful and well done. And the graphic, the art in this graphic novel was really well done. It was mostly black and white, but with these touches of blue that play into the story. That it was really, really well done. I enjoyed that a lot. Back to physical copies of books again. For prompt number 16, the first book in a new to you YA or middle grade series, and for that I read Akata Witch by Nnedi Okorafor. This is the first book in a middle grade fantasy series that is basically, it's been described as a Nigerian Harry Potter. I think that probably isn't really quite right, but it's a fantasy novel in which a young girl in Nigeria who is albino discovers that she has magical powers, and she starts to be taught at a school with other children her age how to use those powers. And it's great. It has Nigerian folklore wrapped up into the fantastical elements, and I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely going to be reading the second book in this series, Akata Warrior, hopefully sometime this year. Then for prompt number 17, read a sci-fi novel with a female protagonist by a female author, and for that I ran Ancillary Justice by Leckie. This science fiction novel is about an ancillary who is basically a AI, a ship's AI, but now in a human body, and her adventures as as she tries to find out what happened to her ship and to her crew, and to basically get revenge for what has happened to her ship and her crew. And one of the interesting things about this novel is the exploration of gender, because for the book is written, it's gender, a lot of the different I don't want to say people because they're not all humans, but a lot of the different races in this book do not recognize gender in the same way that humans do. And so the main character goes by he sometimes, goes by she sometimes, and you as the reader are trying to puzzle out, because we do see gender and we do assign gender to everything. It can keep you a little confused at the beginning, but I really loved that ambiguous aspect of it, and I thought it was really well done, and I really enjoyed this story. And I'm going to be reading on in this series. There are 3 books in this series, and I'm looking forward to continuing on with that. So then for prompt number 21, it was to read a mystery by a person of color or an LGBTQ author, and for this one I read Bluebird by Attica Locke, and Attica Locke is a person of color. This mystery story takes place in Texas. The main character is an African-American Texas Ranger, and he is trying to solve the mystery of a murder that takes place in a small town in Texas, and it appears to be racially motivated. And it is really great sort of police. There's a detective story and suspense and all of that, and I really enjoyed it. I flew through this book. And then the last one I want to talk about for the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge is prompt number 23, a book with a female protagonist over 60 years old. And for that I read The Woman Next Door by Yewande Omotoso. Omotoso, I believe is how you say that. And this is really a nice... No, I won't say nice. This is an interesting story because the main character is not particularly likable. It's basically the story of 2 old ladies in, I think South Africa. I've forgotten now. I read this quite a few months ago, but I believe it's in South Africa. And one lady is black and one lady is white, and they live next door to each other in this sort of housing development type place, you know, like a gated community. These are upper middle class ladies, and they each have very nice homes in this sort of gated community. And they both are widows, I think, at this point in the story, and they were sort of friendly at one point, but they aren't any longer, and they don't get along at all, and neither one of them are particularly likable characters, but it's a really interesting story of, you know, aging and how society sees you when you get to a certain age, and then sort of how your relationship with the people around you as you age, and as you become older, and you maybe have to depend on people a little bit more than you did when you were younger, and what that might mean, and what resentments you still hold from things that happened when you were younger, but you kind of have to get past if you want to retain your independence and you want to, you know, have some semblance of a life, as, you know, and not be totally isolated. So I really enjoyed it. It was great. I always like to read about characters who are older anyway, and that was a great story. So that's what I've read so far for the Read Harder reading challenge, the Book Riot Read Harder reading challenge. Are you reading the prompts for the Read Harder challenge? If so, let me know down below. Let me know how you're progressing, if there are any particular prompts that you have had trouble with, or if any that you really like that got you out of your comfort zone that you particularly wanted to shout out. I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. And I hope you're all doing well. I will talk to you later.